Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Laurie Axman with PCI. It's great to be here today, and we're really pleased to host some amazing faculty entrepreneurs and researchers for a panel that my colleague Josh Jensen has organized, who's our Associate Director of Licensing for Penn Engineering and several other schools here at Penn, and I'm happy to hand it over to Josh.
Thanks, Lori. Hi, everyone. I'm Josh. I've worked with probably a lot of you who are attending this meeting, which is great. I've specifically worked with all of these fine individuals who are both entrepreneurial. Some of them are faculty. All of them are entrepreneurial. For better or worse, hopefully it's a more positive than negative outcomes. And so with this discussion, I hope to elicit from them some thoughts on their experiences and what drove them to be entrepreneurs. And to do that, I'm going to ask them to tell a little bit about their companies, a little about the research, a little about their background, and then talk through what it's been like moving technology out of their labs or out of a faculty member's lab, in the case of Sasha and Karen, because she's both, and trying to push it to the market. And then for Jim specifically, who seems to be a serial inventor, kind of what it's like working with the entrepreneurs. And then Andrew, who's unique, what it's like pushing forward and building your own thing. And Karen will be able to address that as well. So here's our speaker series today, Moving Ideas to Market. Discussion with the following: Sasha Schrode, who's president and CEO of Verix; Jim Weimer, co-founder of NeurAlert, and has several other early stage companies that are in development; Andrew Chakas, founder of AlphaThera; and Karen Hogan, founder of BioRealize and formerly faculty member in biology. So with that, I'm going to ask if we can go have a little roundtable and have each of them to introduce themselves, talk briefly about their history, their research or their experience to date, and then kind of who they're engaged with right now from an entrepreneurial perspective. And since I'm moderating, I'll go with Jim since he's at the top of my screen.
Thanks, Josh. I'm Jim Weimer. I'm a research assistant professor in computer science at Penn. I have a courtesy appointment at the Department of Biomedical and Health Informatics at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. My research area primarily focuses on safe autonomy, and in the context of most of my entrepreneurial efforts, it's in safe medical autonomy. I'm a co-founder of NeurAlert, which is a in-hospital stroke detection company targeting in-hospital stroke detection. And I have a couple other things that are coming out of the pipeline, and I've been working in this med tech space for about 5 years, but been doing this sort of research for over 10, and super excited to be here today. Josh, I think I hit everything you wanted me to talk about initially, right?
You did, I appreciate it. We'll go to Andrew, who's next on my screen.
Yeah, I'm Andrew Chalkis. I'm a professor of bioengineering. And my research in my lab focuses on developing targeted imaging and therapeutic agents. So lots of nanoparticles and also biologics, so antibody and protein-based drugs. Founded AlphaThera, and it's been in 2016, I believe. And the company is spinning out a technology from my lab that focuses on antibody labeling reagents, so ways to control antibody labeling and make it as simple as possible for users. I think it's unique compared to maybe some of the other entrepreneurs here, maybe not, in the sense that it's a reagent. So we're not targeting the therapeutic or diagnostic space or anything that requires any type of FDA approval. So the bar is much lower to get to market. Which I think makes our path a little unique in terms of how we can get there, just because we don't have to go through so many regulatory agencies.
Thanks, Andrew. Sasha, you're next on my screen.
Okay, hi, I'm Sasha Schrode. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Serpex and Verix Health. I've spent the past 17 years in healthcare, almost exclusively in interventional oncology. I started my career in sales and then transitioned to management in larger late-stage medical device companies like CR Bard and MedComp. Later, I transitioned to working with earlier stage companies to drive revenue and really build teams for companies that were looking to be acquired, like Reverse Medical. They were acquired by Medtronic, and Forge Medical, which was acquired by Galero. I've also been a partner and a life science investor at Robinhood for the past 6 years, before I took the opportunity to spin Grepo Technologies, which is now Verix and Serpex, out of the University of Penn.
Thanks, Sasha. I appreciate it. Karen?
Hi, everyone. I'm actually an alum of UPenn, so it's where I did my PhD. And when I finished my PhD in the Department of Biology, I decided, like, gasp, I didn't want to be a tenure track faculty member, and switched into being teaching faculty, and eventually was overseeing a lot of the coordination of lab curriculum. In that time, got connected with folks in the School of Design and started working in the emerging field of biodesign, where you use living material to make all kinds of new products, from furniture to fashion to therapeutics. And while I was doing that, we very quickly discovered that there wasn't accessible technology and know-how for product designers who were entering into this space. And so we've essentially made Lab in a Box. And it's been a tricky fit in the sense that it looks like a piece of scientific equipment, but it's actually designed for a whole new user set. And so there's lots that I can share out about what it means to be a little bit of an odd duck, but very much positioned for a really rapidly emerging sector.
Thanks, Karen. I appreciate it. So to kind of move into our conversation on kind of the realities of doing this work, I think the first questions will be prompted towards, as you were in the lab, this will be directed to Jim, Andrew, and Karen directly. When did you realize you had something that was innovative that could be structured or brought into a company setting, so foundational for a company? We'll start with Andrew this time.
Sure. So our lab develops technologies all the time. So we're kind of geared around developing, again, new therapies or imaging agents or things to make life easier. So I think all along we kind of had kind of an eye on the entrepreneurial side and startup side. But there were a couple of things that held us back. One is I felt like we never had the optimal formulation, or we were still worried about scale up. There were still some additional aspects that needed to be worked on. But for the startup that we did found, AlphaThera, it was just one of those technologies where we were confident in all of those pieces of it. So we knew we could scale up the technology. We knew that it was easy enough to use. And what convinced me of that is when we had undergraduates in the lab picking up these antibody labeling agents, and they were successful in their first try and can use them as easy as anyone else. It just gave me the confidence that, this is really something that a lot of people could use, and convinced me that it was worth going forward. So there are other pieces that I think we were just fortunate to fall in place. I think for a lot of faculty, there's kind of this barrier. It's kind of, we don't really know what to do or how to start a company or what steps to take first. I was extremely fortunate. I just happened to have this technology come out around the same time I had a year sabbatical. So I could take the time to kind of sort my way through and kind of figure it out. Not every faculty has that opportunity. And, I think PCI is there to help form that bridge for a lot of faculty. But, I was lucky enough to have this time to look into and talk to enough people to see what steps I needed to take. And, the one thing I found out is, I probably shouldn't, the barrier is actually not that big. So there's a lot of things that can be done very easily to kind of get the ball rolling. So, in terms of forming a company, in terms of the paperwork needed to start applying for funding like SBIR and some of these other non-dilutive funding mechanisms, really can be done in an order of just weeks. I think the biggest thing is just the mental barrier of getting something off the ground, and just putting aside a few hours to meet and talk with people. And I would say that overall running a business has been similar to that. So it's a lot of times the steps that need to be taken are easy. You just need to think through it or talk to the right people that can kind of explain it to you, or figure out what's the next steps that can be taken. And usually it comes down to something that's relatively obvious. So it's, the challenges aren't as big as most of us perceive. But I think that hopefully gives an idea of kind of where we were when we started, and kind of what we did and the timing of getting the company started.
Yeah, and Andrew, and building on that, I had a question about what was it like engaging with a business person? So you worked with Karen O'Neill for a little bit and trying to help formulate the company and kind of negotiate things on the business side. What was that like?
Yeah, so I would say the biggest hurdle for us was just finding that person. And the way we did it is just a lot of networking in the beginning. So when I had my sabbatical year coming up, even prior to that, just getting ready for that sabbatical year, I was just meeting with people either at Penn or around Penn. And the nice thing is I think the environment in Philly and Penn is a lot of people are engaged and a lot of people are excited about entrepreneurship, and there's never a shortage of people to talk with and get feedback. I think all of us have to take everything with a grain of salt. Everybody's got an opinion too, but there's always people to talk with and get some insight into things. And with Wharton on campus and PCI and all the people involved in Penn Health Tech and all these other kind of places to meet people, there's plenty of people to get information from. But the biggest hurdle for us was finding a person like Karen who helped us get started. So, Karen came in and helped us negotiate the license with Penn and kind of got us off the ground. And we went the non-traditional route, so we didn't go through the Upstart program. So we were kind of left on our own to kind of find somebody to help lead the company. And it took a lot of talking. It took, a lot of networking, a lot of emails just to find the right person. And we were fortunate enough. We got, an ex-scientist from J&J who I actually had known before through some of my activities on campus. And it just seemed like the right fit. So, once we found somebody that had an interest and that was willing to help us, it was very simple to interact with them. The hard part is convincing somebody to dedicate time without any money or resources and take those first steps with you. So, and I wish I had a solution to that even to this day. I don't know. I think a lot of it is doing just what we did, which is just networking and talking and keep on engaging people until the right pieces fall into place.
Great, thanks, Andrew. So Karen, I'll go to you next. I think similar question. So you had an innovation in your lab that you've collaborated with on campus, and you decided to leave your job at Penn to kind of pursue it. So you talk a little bit about what was that like and what your decision matrix was to take on that opportunity.
So I think I'm naturally a risk taker. And I think that's like a key component of being able to do that and having a stomach for the highs and lows, and not getting too wrapped up in how high a high gets or how low a low gets, but just kind of enduring and showing up each day to, push the company forward. It wasn't an easy decision, but practically it had to be made. I was at the point where I was working full-time for Penn and working full-time for the company, 2 young children and a spouse that traveled for work. It just I could do it only for so long. And when I realized, the decision had to be made, I had to weigh what the opportunities were for both. And it was truly one of those things where, with the support of family and friends and my colleagues, it was like dive right in. The time was right. We needed that leadership, and it would have been a regret had I not stepped forward with it. So I also left at a time where we had funding to sustain me for a certain period of time, not with any kind of extravagant salary, but enough to make it work. And so that helped mitigate the risk. So that was very practically, that's part of the process. You have to pay your bills. You need to make sure that there's some financial stability. Otherwise, that becomes actually the thing that can kill the endeavor. So it was not an easy decision, but it is one that I'm very happy I made, even with, growing a company through a pandemic, which none of us could have foreseen. I'm sure we'll get a chance to touch on that.
No, yeah, we will. So I appreciate that. Jim, so you definitely come to our group very often with unique ideas. And so I want you to talk a little bit about, how you come up with what you feel could be innovative, and then what prompts you to kind of come to PCI specifically, and also discuss with others the concepts you have for these ideas.
Yeah, so I work at the intersection of computer science and medicine in the autonomy space. And so that maybe naturally gives me an advantage compared to my BME counterparts, where I need data and I take data and I do things with data. So I don't have to develop a reagent or anything like that and spend years in a lab. Because of that, I can be pretty agile in rolling out new things by leveraging IP that we develop, primarily at the intersection of making machine learning and signal processing safe in these sort of medical domains. my research is very much at, well, I come from computer science now. I would say I'm more in the middle area between computer science and applied, where my research is often considered applied research, which naturally puts me in a nice position to transition theory into practice, which leads to the type of innovation that I can get patents for through PCI. I should predicate everything here by saying I have a very different experience than Andrew and Karen, in that, this is now NerdAlert is my third, I'll call it my third attempt at a company, but the first one to ever make it past being just an idea on a paper. I've done all my development of these companies while remaining faculty. I didn't take a year off for a sabbatical or quit my job. And because of that, I had 2 epic failures before even getting started on something. I would say that one of the things that's really helped me is exploiting Upstart at PCIB. It allows for a faculty member or someone else to really be connected with the right people without having to take time to actually go out and do it myself. I think my CEO, Eric Corkhill, is actually on the call today, who knows Sasha, I think, pretty well. And I don't want to say too much because he's probably watching very carefully over me to make sure, but I would say that the biggest difference between NerdAlert and the other companies is Eric joined his video, great. Is that PCIV connected us with Eric, who has been an amazing CEO. And anyone that wants to start a company from like a faculty or academic perspective, I think the first thing you have to realize is, as an academic, you have certain deficiencies. Namely, I probably don't know how to start a business. And you should go out and get someone like Eric to really build that business for you, because he's taken us all during a pandemic from a company that was just an idea on a paper with some nice graphs and results to something that now has funding and some real steam behind it. So thanks, Eric. But and thanks PCIV. As Josh said, I'm kind of a serial inventor here, and I have some new things coming out that's really been spawned by the development. One thing I'd like to state is, as a faculty member and as a researcher, I'd like to try to identify the things I can do as part of my entrepreneurship efforts that can feed back to my research. In doing so, that means that some things are engineering efforts I'll actually take on and do, even though they appear engineering efforts, because they can feed other avenues of research. And in doing that, we actually had a new thing that just won a Nursing Innovator, the Nursing Innovation Challenge for detecting postpartum hemorrhage, which leverages a lot of the same technologies we're doing in NerdAlert, now targeting a completely separate domain. And we hope to roll that company out, start it in the next year or so, probably also going the PCIV route. So anyone that's interested in kind of how to get into a SEAM, especially if you're interested in the machine learning and data side of doing startups and how to position yourself in the med tech space, I'd be very happy talking with you more offline. Just reach out.
Thanks, Jim. So Sasha, I think they both mentioned kind of networking and finding a partner as key to moving forward. You are on the other side, so you came inbound and found a technology to work with. Can you talk a little bit about that experience and what prompted you to choose what you did?
Sure. So actually, I think Andrew said it perfectly. It's just really through networking. And I think through my involvement in the community, through Robin Hood Ventures, I came to know Mike Dischwitz at PCI. And he also learned a little bit more about my background. And I also was working pretty closely with a few of the Penn entrepreneurs. So through that exploration, I learned about the really interesting technology that came out of Mark Yim's lab that I thought could be really game-changing for the interventional oncology field, which I had been working on for a long time. So that was really the catalyst for me.
And so what was it like first engaging with Mark, and did it take a little while to hit it off, or did you have some synergy to begin with?
I was very fortunate because if anyone on this call knows Mark Yim, you'll know he is one of the nicest people in the world. He's also just brilliant. So I think it was a really exciting opportunity for me to work alongside Mark. We also had one full-time engineer. When I was hired, we already had a small grant. So we had a little bit of funding that was supporting our full-time engineer. So it's really just the three of us, and we worked really closely with Mike Dischwitz, like I said, at PCI. But overall, I think I was very fortunate to have kind of my place within the organization right away. And I think Mark, appreciated my expertise on kind of the business and commercialization side of what we were trying to kind of work through. And he knew, that he could add value on the technical side. So I think for us, it was a really nice collaboration.
Thanks, Sasha. And so we'll move from that into kind of the next topic here. It's building a company, a technology company, which is maybe a little more difficult. And Sasha, I'm gonna come to you because things change as you move a company out of the lab and into the market space. And so I'd love for you, if you can, talk a little bit about what how you transition Mark's technology out of the lab and kind of the hurdles and decisions you had to make moving it forward.
So I think everyone's experience is certainly going to be different. Well, when I looked at the opportunity with, at the time, Grepo Technologies, I immediately saw this was a platform technology. And platform, when I say platform in the medical device world, I mean a platform that we could build upon. So we could do so many different things with it. We were at the time exploring applications in the liver. So specifically, again, focused on interventional oncology applications. And our grant was actually, supporting our research efforts to de-risk the technology for abdominal cavity access. And at that time, J&J, J-POD was just starting. So I had, really this great opportunity to start getting to know the J&J team and learning a little bit more about unmet needs that they were looking to solve. So that actually led us to spin out the second company, Serpex, that focused on the lung platform. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, Josh, but I think for me, the compelling part of, maybe building this company was, for me, interventional oncology has always been a passion. And so I think for me, I want to be able to change the way we diagnose and treat cancer. And I can't think of a more important place to focus my career than on designing, the future of healthcare and devices that can make the diagnosing process of, cancer and treating cancer better for patients.
Yeah, well, to probe into that just slightly, as you went out, you engaged with some potential customers and partners, and also engaged with some financiers. Did you have to make decisions on, maybe choosing different directions, or maybe augmenting what you originally thought was the technology or the core concept?
So I guess in the sense we were still actually going down parallel paths, but we did prioritize one platform over the other. I think, doing kind of a market assessment and looking, at the field in general, we wanted to identify what was the most critical unmet need. We also were getting a tremendous amount of interest from larger strategics on our lung platform. So that helped us prioritize that.
Yeah, and that's just, it's the nature of business. So I'm glad you brought that up, or we were able to talk about that briefly. So Karen, similar question. I think, originally you and Orkon had a concept in mind for what a product would look like. Is that still the case, or has it changed a little bit as you've moved out of the laboratory and into the marketplace?
I mean, it's changed like 7 ways to Sunday. So it's, we started to an earlier question, the way we knew that we were onto something was that it was immediately picked up by Popular Science magazine and featured at South by Southwest. And so it was clear that we were kind of entering into a space of need. The first technology that we developed and filed a patent on is not the one that we actually decided to go to market with. It was ahead of its market, and there's still very much value in that technology, but it was clear that there needed to be a lower barrier to entry for our end users. And so that came about from lots and lots and lots of customer interviews. So we talked to everybody across all of the industries where our technology could be used. And one of the things that we did without knowing we were doing it was make a catalog of, how many additional items were they saying they needed to see before they would adopt the technology? Or how many times would we have to shake our head in a conversation like, sure, yep, it can do this, but not yet having implemented that feature. And that was really valuable information to be taking in, because it helped us strip down to what was actually required to take a product to market. And so then there was a second patent that was filed, and we're in the space of hardware. So when people say hardware is hard, they're not lying. It's capitally intensive. It requires lots of innovation, like lots of skill sets to even get to a product that people will want to use. And even at that point, it looks like a beat up prototype. So it's just very interesting kind of thinking about it from that perspective. We we're very fortunate in being able to leverage a lot of press around our technology. So able to get it into high profile exhibits where we would gain a lot of traction and land some really important clients that helped give like trust in the brand. But I think the biggest thing is when you're in that early stage, everything is a possibility. That can be wonderful and also really hamper your ability to actually get to a point where you have a product that you're going to sell. Once you're starting to sell something, the game entirely shifts. I mean, now you have to have something that people are willing to pay money for and pay at a rate that can support your operations. And that's just like a total shift in how you think about your innovation. And one of the hardest things that I see coming out of academia to make that transition, where we really value and reward intellectual curiosity and creativity and innovation of new ideas. That doesn't always translate when you need to be hyper-focused on getting a product out that's selling and generating revenue. That discipline becomes super important.
Thanks, Karen. I appreciate the comments there. Jim, for you, you mentioned you've had a couple of ideas that didn't really move forward. I guess in looking back, are there things that you might have considered differently, or did you learn things along the way that just maybe made those concepts less than attractive to the marketplace?
Yeah, I mean, looking back, whenever I started working on the underlying technology that's basically forming the basis of everything moving forward, it came originally out of environmental monitoring, and this was back in the days of clean coal. And I thought about transitioning something then, but no one cared about clean coal. Then I went to I transitioned to a building energy management domain, where I worked on the same sort of math and underlying science and pushed it a little further. And then I found out nobody really cares if you can detect HVAC failures, because 30% of the HVAC system's down all the time anyway. After that, I came to Penn, and it turns out the mathematics of physiology are very similar to buildings. And so I was able to transition that science into the physiology and human domain. And there I've kind of found some home. So I would say along the way, I've learned one major thing, especially when it comes from the signal processing and machine learning side, and it's that robustness is key. If you want to build anything that's built on data, I don't care if you have 98% performance. I want to know what's your worst case performance, especially if you're going to be in this sort of regulated environment. And I think that's something that maybe some people miss the mark. Again, speaking to academics, oftentimes we show a plot where we say, look at how great my performance is. But if you let the wind blow a little too hard, that robot falls over and you have to redo the YouTube video so you can get a right video for your conference publication. That sort of robustness doesn't work when you actually want to build a real business. So things I've learned over my career is robustness is far more important than accuracy.
Fantastic. It's a great point. And then for Andrew, I think, as I understand, Alphathera is looking at first sales imminent, if not maybe have recently occurred, and you're kind of moving products to market. Is that product what you originally thought it would be, or is it different?
Yeah, so we made a pivot very early on as well. So when I first started Alphathera, and you can probably tell by the name, it has Thera in it. We were actually anticipating making therapeutics, so in particular antibody drug conjugates. And we pivoted very early because I had been fortunate enough. I have some contacts in pharmaceutical industry, or was able to gain connections to some people to talk with in various aspects of big pharma. And I realized pretty early on that it's going to be really hard to crack. They were developing their own competing technologies. They were really more interested in the antibody itself as opposed to the platform technology that we were developing. I felt like there was a lot of resistance there. So I knew what we had was valuable, and I knew certainly for labs like mine, it would be well received. So we made a pivot early on to switch to reagents, and decided to go down that road even within a few months of starting the company. Once we went down that road, we realized another hurdle we had, which is getting funding for reagents. So most venture capitalists or almost any funding mechanism we can think of, weren't super excited about reagents because they think the value of the reagent market's too low. So, maybe capping out at just a few million, which we've since realized is order of magnitude off. We think we can get much higher than that. But there's a lot of resistance for VCs in particular to invest in reagents. So we targeted non-dilutive government funding from the very beginning and have kind of stuck with it and have been fortunate to be successful, where we've brought in now on the order of about $5 million of non-dilutive funding from the NIH. And we knew we would get some traction there. And we were fortunate to get it. It's always a competition, but just from my experience as a faculty and applying to NIH to begin with, I had some insight on how to write the grants and kind of what people were looking for at the NIH in terms of technology development. And that's really kind of what got us off the ground. The next big aspect was just getting good people to work on the science and get this into a position that we can make enough to sell it. And there we were super lucky as well. So there's one other lab in the whole world that works on something similar. And it's just amazing luck to think that this even happened, but somebody from that lab, and this is in Europe, no less. So somebody from the lab moved to New Jersey and contacted me a few months after I started the company, inquiring about whether I was interested in forming a startup around this technology. Just got lucky with the pieces falling into place. And we kind of approached company formation a little bit different. So we knew that the barrier was lower, and we kind of took a risk early on thinking that maybe we don't need investment, but maybe we can get enough funds from either personal funds or non-dilutive funding to get this off the ground. So most of our investment went towards scientists and kind of, the non-C positions in the company. So we left that to Karen to kind of navigate that. And then a graduate student that has since left Penn is kind of navigating that with us as well. So he's a co-founder. And then basically all the rest of the funding went to just developing the technology. And the SBIR, I can't speak highly enough about it, but really gave us the funding we needed to get these things going. And as you mentioned, so we started sales in September. And we have had first sales on a number of different products at launch. Because of the research and development we did, we had on the order of about 10 products just from the start in terms of different reagents that we can offer. So there's a couple that we think the value proposition is higher than others. So, we're very limited in what we can afford for marketing. SBIR is the one limitation is you can't use the majority of the funds for anything but research and development, but they do have fees tied to those that you can charge, that you can use towards anything. And then there's also just some initial investment that us as founders put into the company that we're using towards that. So now it's now our kind of where we are now is just strategic marketing and trying to find the right users. It's very early on, so it's hard to say, but we've gotten on the order of several dozen customers already. And almost every customer we have has been a repeat customer, which is nice. And some in industry, so including pharma. So we're hoping we can get a few more of those, but they tend to buy more than single reagents. So we're starting to get momentum. Our key now is just getting word out and getting visibility through our limited marketing that we can do. And then most importantly, retaining the customers that we do have and getting them to start scaling up themselves.
Thanks, Andrew. So Karen, similar question, how you utilize some unique financing that a lot of Penn faculty haven't utilized before. You participated in DreamIt, and you've also raised some capital. Can you talk about that experience a little bit?
Yeah, so DreamIt was really key for us as a validation that we could turn this academic idea into a commercial operation. So our founding team was an engineer from Siemens, faculty member from the School of Design, and myself. So we had a designer, an engineer, and a scientist. Nobody there had an MBA. Nobody had run a company before. And so when we went to DreamIt, I joke that they put training wheels on us, sent us down the hill and took them off midway. And so I fell in love with the process of talking to clients and thinking about how to sell a product and thinking about how we would raise funds. And so that was a role that I ended up taking on within the company. Lots of mentors showed up in that process. Some wanted, equity and money and, all kinds of things that we just weren't prepared to offer. So finding those right fits, has been alluded to before, was really important. We started out with friends and family, which is not an option for everybody. So we were fortunate in that regard. And then branched out into like our friendly professional network of people who invested regularly. And so when we did that, we actually ended up bringing in a whole new skill set. So we were talking about people who, were CEOs of their companies and really kind of helped refine our thinking and help us think about how we set up a board and how we do a regular cadence of communication and what do our financials look like and how do we develop projections. So an MBA on the street was like key there. We could have brought in somebody, and we did try multiple times to bring in somebody with the business background to grow our team. But it actually, like a good portion of our product requires market education. And so we could actually never have one of us step back fully from that role. And that was just something we had to face early on. So I warn against too many consultants. I really warn against it. You're going to have to do the hard work of getting the company up and running. There's just no way around it.
So Sasha, I'm gonna save you for last because you've seen both sides. So I'll come right back to you. But first, Jim, what's it been like? I know your CEO Eric is out financing. So how has it been? What has your engagement been to support those efforts or to be engaged on that front to help finance this venture?
Yeah, well, Eric's been doing great. During a pandemic, he actually joined our company during the pandemic. So we were able to recruit a CEO remotely and virtually, which I think is that's a whole new experience. In fact, Eric and we've only met in person once, and that was at the Aberdeen House in Maryland on I-95, just so Eric could have a face-to-face. So Eric's been hitting the pavement and has raised 125K, and we have a few other irons in the fire right now, and actively trying to raise 1.5 million to get us through our breakthrough device designation and then to FDA submission. My role, I would really encourage, especially for someone that wanted to stay faculty and pursue a business, know your role in the business. My role is technical. I'm the science behind our technology, and I leave the expertise of building the business and understanding how to raise money to Eric and to the PCIV. And so my role is mainly to support, whenever we're out raising money, Eric's leading the show. It's his ball game. Whenever there's technical questions or concerns come up, I step in, and that's when I answer. If there's clinical questions or questions about the application side, that's when my co-founder, Dr. Steve Mezzi, jumps in and shows off his expertise. And then and we have a CTO, Det Anson, who's there and actually handling all of our back-end engineering efforts. So, understanding your role in the company is absolutely key, and valuing everyone's role and making sure that the team dynamic. I'm sure Karen and Andrew and Sasha would agree. Your team dynamic, you have to work on that. You have to, a lot of strong personalities in building a business out. Before Eric joined our company, I'm sure Steve and I spent more time fighting than we actually spent making progress. Since then, we've worked that out, and it's been a great working relationship since. So when it comes to raising money, get the right people to raise money for you. If you're not an expert in raising money, that would really shrink your development line. And I would agree with Karen. Don't hire too many consultants. We have it, and we're actively avoiding that as much as possible, only going for the right ones at the right time.
Fantastic. Sasha, you've seen both sides of this. I think you inherited phase one, if not a phase two, and then you come from the investment world a little bit, and you went out and fundraised a significant amount of money. So can you on a high level, compare and contrast kind of what you think are the benefits and detriments to both types of money, and then the realities of raising a large round to your extent?
Sure. Well, I think coming from the world of investing, I'm an angel investor. So obviously we're investing pretty early stage. So I think when you think about your company, you have to think about where you are, as a company. Are you very early? Are you in a seed stage? Are you looking for, kind of friends and family? Or are you looking for angel investment? Or are you looking for, kind of Series A, Series B funding? And that kind of is really where you need to look at venture capital or strategic investment. One of the things I would say, one of the trends I think we're seeing a lot more over the past few years is companies that are relatively early stage are getting strategic investments from larger strategics, at least in the medical device pharma world. And that's really wonderful. It's such an appealing thing if you are successful at getting some venture funding from like a J&J Ventures or Medtronic Ventures. A lot of the big firms, at least in the healthcare world, have venture arms. My advice would be certainly to think about pursuing that even at an early stage. With respect to being an investor, I think an early stage investor is looking at the team, the technology. They want to know that the technology is going to work, and they want to have conviction that the team can execute. And I'm going to kind of quote my investors. They always lead with the business model. So I think for them, what they saw in Greppo Technologies at the time was that it was a really interesting business model. And like I shared, a platform technology that we could apply and build, a company around. So we can continue to build off of this platform. And I think that was really appealing. And, from my perspective at Robinhood, a lot of the companies that we're investing in have multiple kind of interesting characteristics, definitely a great team, really interesting technologies or therapies, I should say, and good business model. We understand who the strategics are. We know what the M&A is like in that space, and we have confidence that we're going to obviously, have a return on our investment. So I hope that's helpful advice, but kind of coming at it from multiple angles. I was definitely needing to raise a significant amount of funding to take our platform to the next level and get commercial. So I kind of immediately started pitching venture capital, but I'm an angel investor. So I think for me, it's great to see a lot of early stage companies pitching angel investors. And, grant funding is always excellent to kind of de-risk the technology early on as well.
So I think my last question on this front for Sasha and Karen, is it a lot of effort to go out and fundraise for any community? Is it? I've heard it's a full-time job. You maybe bring in an expert. So can you give some thought to that?
I mean, the answer is
Sure.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, agree.
Yeah, it is. It just is. Sasha, you can start and I can add a little color if you'd like.
I would say absolutely. I mean, I think my advice is when you begin the fundraising process, try to gather all of the documentation you need and start to build a data room. I mean, it's going to save a tremendous amount of time in the long run if you already have all of your information kind of compiled in a data room. So it could be Dropbox. There's all kinds of companies out there. But that's really the first start to diligence with an investor, and that's angel groups as well as VCs. They're all looking for kind of the same information, and work with your advisors or your CEO to build out a data room. I think that will expedite the process. It certainly is a full-time job, and a lot of VCs and angels now are transitioning to virtual pitches. So I think it's different than when Karen and I were fundraising 2 years ago. That really wasn't an option. You had to be there in person. So if an investor wanted to see you in New York in 2 days, you kind of had to rearrange your whole entire schedule to make sure you could get out there. Or if that investor was on the West Coast, you have to be available. Thankfully now, I think the world has changed, and most VCs and angels are more than happy to have people pitch virtually, which I think is going to make things a little easier in the future.
Yeah, I second that. It's a really nice change because one of the expenses that comes with fundraising historically has been the cost of travel and lodging, which is difficult when you're trying to still run the operation at the same time. So fundraising is incredibly hard. You really have to be ready to hear no, and you need to develop a really good instinct for when somebody wants to tell you no, but isn't telling you no. So that was kind of the way I started to lead in the fundraising, was like, it's best for both of us if we can get to the no as fast as possible. I can tell if we're getting to a yes because the conversations keep rolling. And that was a huge time saver. It's just hard to raise in general. It's hard to raise with a lot of the hype that's on Twitter and other places where it seems like everybody's, fundraising and closing at these tremendous valuations. And you just have to kind of keep your head down and keep going. It's a brutal process. It doesn't really end either. Like, once you start doing it, as soon as you close your money, you get like a little bit of a respite, and then you're thinking about the next raise that you're going to have to do.
Yeah, and I appreciate you both bringing up the point, closing down conversations that aren't going somewhere. And I know that we've had situations where people just seem to be strung along. So is there any advice to say when is it a time to close down that conversation, or should you just, not to use the term, but ghost the people who seem to just keep stringing you along?
I developed a good habit of following up, and just, I would follow up once. There's always the chance that something wouldn't be, would be missed in a conversation. And then usually at the second or third time gave the out of, this is the third time I'm reaching out. I'm going to assume that there's no longer interest, happy to take another call if I'm incorrect in my understanding. And that was respectful and, but helped kind of shut down where things were going. And I have found that to be, a good tactic. It doesn't burn any bridges. It allows you to revisit those conversations down the road when things have changed with the company as well.
Thanks, Karen. So we've got, I think, 8 or 9 minutes left. And we have at least one question that's popped up from the audience. If anybody else has any questions, please send them to the chat. Here they come. So there are a couple things I want you to be able to address very quick and kind of closing remarks. We'll do questions first, but in the background, we'd love to get some appreciation for what the year of COVID has been like for you. And then also, what are your hopes or aspirations for the future for your ventures? So while you think about that, I'm going to bring up at least 2 questions that have popped up here. The first from Ian is, could you talk about the benefits and downsides of corporate venture funding? And then also anything around the JLab program, the positive, negative, and what the value you receive from that. So I'll leave it to the group. I think specifically Sasha and maybe Karen have the most exposure here on the fundraising side.
So I can start. I think my experience with again, I'm kind of coming from the medical device world, so not knowing everyone's backgrounds here. I think coming from the medical device world, venture, most of the larger strategics now have venture arms. So if it's a company that, you think, let's say J&J may be interested in acquiring at some point in time, I think it makes a lot of sense to start having conversations, and the right group to probably have those conversations with when you're early is the venture arm, because they are looking at assessing technologies that may be a viable fit, and they will make strategic investments, and they are generally equity investments. So my advice is it doesn't hurt to have those conversations as long as you think, you're at a point in the company that you're prepared and ready for, a Series A raise. I would caution you to have those conversations without really being ready with the technology. You want to be ready for investors when you're pitching. I think that's kind of just generic advice, even when you're pitching an angel group. But overall, the benefit of a strategic investment is once you have that, a lot of other investors would really, like to follow on. And it's very validating that a company like J&J or Medtronic is invested in the company, because they obviously see there is a strategic fit within the organization and maybe a potential acquisition.
So thanks for that, Sasha. And so we have another question here, and it is regarding SPR funding and I-Corps. So I think, Andrew, you've mentioned a lot of success with SPR funding. I'm not sure if anyone here participated in I-Corps. Okay, Jim, have you participated in I-Corps?
Yeah, but not as part of Nerd Alert, a previous one.
Okay. So yeah, if you could give a quick synopsis of your experience there and the value you see, and then also any pitfalls that you may have run into going after non-dilutive federal funding, SBIRs, STTRs. And I think, Jim and Andrew will probably have a bit more of a sense of that. Karen, I'm not sure if you guys went after SBIR funding. Okay. So yeah, so Jim and Andrew, if you could talk about what it's like getting funding from the government on this project, and then also, Jim, your experience with the I-Corps program.
Yeah, so I would absolutely recommend applying for SBR, and sooner rather than later. So there are advantages and disadvantages. The advantages obviously is non-dilutive. Phase 1 is not a huge amount of money, but on the order of a couple $100,000. But phase 2 is relatively substantial. Now it's almost up to 2 million, somewhere between 1.5 and 2 million. So you can get quite a bit of work done. So I'd absolutely recommend applying. The reason why I say sooner rather than later is because the disadvantage is that the timeline is very slow, and it could end up going in for multiple rounds, which makes it even slower. It can be tricky to get it on a first submission, regardless of how good it is, because I think reviewers are always a little hesitant to give too good of a score the first time they see something. And in terms of timelines being slow, just to give you an idea, it's usually an order of about 9 months between the time that you submit and the time that you actually get funding. So there is a big delay there. So you always have to take that into account. We were unbelievably fortunate that the timings worked out, but you always have to plan, 6 to 9 months ahead of time, and hope for the best that you get things when you need them, and have mechanisms of filling in any valleys that you may run into. So my recommendation is really sooner rather than later. The only other recommendation I would have is to go SBIR over STTR if you can. Our first grant was actually STTR. It's certainly a mechanism. STTR, the difference is that the faculty is the PI, and SBIR, somebody at the company is the PI. And in order to submit an SBIR, you need somebody at a company. And of course, when you're first starting a company, you may not have that yet. So that was the tricky part for us. So we were kind of forced to start with an STTR. The reason why I say SBIR is the better route to go, if possible, is because NIH and presumably NSF, although I'm less familiar with the NSF, has a lot more money in the SBIR program compared to the STTR. So for example, to get a phase 2 through an STTR, it would be close to impossible, because some of their budgets in certain programs aren't even big enough to cover the phase 2, or if they are, they could just pay for 1 or 2. So they'd rather cover a lot of phase 1s. So we made a transition from an STTR to an SBIR when we switched to phase 2. But even for phase 1, there's just more money in the pot at the NIH, so they're funding more in that program. And then the last thing I would recommend is, I think as faculty, we basically become professional grant writers. Having a faculty read over an SBIR, I think, is highly advantageous. So a lot of the SBIRs that are submitted, maybe from the industry side, and don't have necessarily the experience that faculty may have in submitting, for example, an NIH grant. Faculty is submitting these things every 3 months just to keep their lab going, and the competition's fierce, and we all kind of learn the tricks of the trade and become experts. The last suggestion there is just to have somebody look over it, or to help with the writing that has that level of experience, because you're going to be competing against people that do.
All right. Thanks for that, Andrew. And then Jim, any additional comments or your perspective on I-Corps?
I think Andrew hit it all. I've submitted to both NIH and NSF, and they're wildly different applications that focus on slightly different things. So again, get someone to help you if you're not familiar with the mechanisms. Absolutely. With respect to I-Corps, I would recommend any faculty member that has no idea about how to start a business do I-Corps. That's the baseline, right? Just get in there, and it gets you introduced, it gets you thinking in the right way. Not just faculty, postdocs, graduate students, anything. If you want to jump into this space, that's a good first step. Again, echoing what Andrew said, apply for funding early and often, and keep doing it. The lead times can be long, and that's no reason not to keep applying. Some companies will get them, some won't, and hopefully, even if you don't get it, you're still successful in the end, because people like Sasha will invest early in the angel space. So there we go.
So yeah, we have like a minute. So first off, I want to thank everybody for participating. I know some of you have hard 1 o'clock deadlines, so I want to make sure we're we represent, we recognize that. And if there's any last party comment, then I'm going to open the floor up to each of you to kind of give me a sense of, where you're going and if COVID really impacted you or, it actually was beneficial. So Karen, I'll start with you.
Great. Yeah. COVID was like the worst timing ever. We were fundraising and ready to launch in food and beverage, and both things got hit. Like literally, term sheet came in March, I think like March 10th, and then everything shut down March 13th. So we actually used it as an opportunity to grab some air and do a bunch of R&D that we had been meaning to do based on user feedback. The real benefit is that now everybody knows what biotechnology is. We're in an out of control biology event. Everybody knows what a PCR is. They know the value of vaccine development. And so we're actually able to pick on that as we launch forward. So we're really excited about kind of this space that's going to open up post-pandemic in the bio world. And I think that's probably relevant to a lot of people here. It's going to be a really, really good phase for biology post-pandemic.
We're excited to see what happens next with BioRelax. That's going to be very exciting.
Yeah, we'll be in the Design Museum in London at the end of the month.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
We're going to plug for that out to the whole group so they're able to look at that. So Sasha, how about your companies? How's the last year impacted you and where are things going?
So we were fortunate to still be in the R&D and preclinical phase. So we were able to make progress, all but slow progress because a lot of the team had to rotate in because we did move the company to California. California, unfortunately, was much more closed than this area all summer, really. So it was a little bit of a challenge, but we were fortunate. We've been making progress. We're gearing up towards our 5th preclinical study next week, and we're fortunate to be on track to submit our first 2 products to the FDA at the end of this year. So that's our update, and thanks so much for having me with this panel today.
Thanks for participating. We appreciate it. Andrew, how about Alpha-Thera?
Yeah, so it was good and bad. So the challenging part was the labs got shut down for a period of time. So we weren't able to continue working for at least a couple of months. The good part is we took advantage of that time to write another SBIR specific for COVID because we have a bunch of releases out. And since we have an antibody labeling technology and antibodies are used in all sorts of diagnostic and detection assays for COVID, we were able to put something together pretty quick without and could kind of extend it from the work we were already doing pretty easily. And we were lucky enough to get one of those. So it ended up giving us opportunity to get some additional funding and allowed us to work in this kind of new exciting area. So we took advantage of the time off to apply for more funds.
Fantastic. And then Jim, you mentioned driving up to Maryland to make the intro to your CEO face-to-face. So as the year really slowed things, or do you feel like virtually you've been able to kind of move things forward in a rapid manner?
It's hard to say what would have happened had COVID not happened, right? But we ever since we got our CEO Eric onboarded, things have just to the moon, and we're doing great, raising money. We were able to build out a supplementary technology during the COVID environment using off-the-shelf components to start our 2nd study, which will give us the data we need to go to our FDA breakthrough device designation application, which we hope to submit later this summer. So, things went well, no complaints, not going to look back and worry about what could have been, just going to move forward and keep going.
Fantastic. So with that, I appreciate you all participating today. I know everybody's super busy, but it's been a great panel from my perspective, at least. And I want to thank you